Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Startup Sales. Really excited for today's guest, Tom Hunt. He's the founder of Bcast, Fame podcast marketing agency. He also has a few marketing podcasts himself. So it's going to be really good. A lot of insights in today's episode. He's going to be talking about how to use content to sell, about early stage growth, and if you have a podcast, how to use a podcast to also sell and help your company. So don't miss today's episode, and let's get to it.
Startup Sales is a podcast about what it's really like to get a business off the ground. We talk with founders, CEOs, and sales VPs from the high-tech market. You'll learn how to build and scale a sales team. You'll also hear about the growth challenges and tough decisions from others who have had both successes and failures. And now, your host of the Startup Sales Podcast, Adam Springer.
Hey, Tom, welcome.
Hey, Adam. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. Can you give everybody listening a little bit of background? I mean, I tried to do it, but it doesn't do any justice.
Yeah, I think the story starts when I'm like 22 and I'm working at a consulting company. And then the story ends, or the story brings us up to today, where I've now spent 8 years just working out how to sell stuff on the internet. And so the stuff has been information, people/services, software, events, various different things. And that's all I've really done. If I could summarize it, I've had like 20 different things. Most didn't work, a couple did work. But if I could summarize it, it would be working out how to sell things on the internet. And specifically, if you wanted to get it even more specific, it would be with content, whether that's written or audio. I haven't really done much with video. So it's really learning how to sell stuff on the internet with written and audio content.
Okay, that's interesting. So what would you say is the biggest mistake that people make when trying to sell software online?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake would be thinking that people give a shit about your... Can you swear on the phone? Thinking that people care about you or the product. I think that's the big one. When you realize that someone is only going to buy because it's going to improve their life, that's like a big realization. And then when that clicks, you start to see the world through the eyes of the people you're trying to sell to, and then things get a bit easier, whether you are writing a blog post, doing a demo, or recording a podcast. And that's actually quite a fundamental thing, isn't it? It's not just restricted to sales and marketing. It's like restricted to life. You could say, apart from your very close family and friends, that actually no one does give a shit about you. and if you want to influence them to get your own way, then you need to work out what they want and then try and give that to them first.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you said that, because most salespeople will actually say that, but you're not actually a salesperson in the traditional sense. You're more on the marketing side.
Yeah, no, you're right. But the thing is, and they're so intertwined. Yeah. The best salesperson I've ever met is probably also the best marketer that I've met. And I always say that I'm not good at sales, but actually I think I'm getting good at it now because I've had all the marketing background. And then when you run your own small company, you spend most of your time selling. Yeah. And so, I'm definitely, I'm getting better.
Good. So let's kind of just jump into it then. If I'm an early stage company and I haven't been working on putting out content or anything, how do I get going with that?
Yeah, I think the first thing you do is just, and this is not a great answer for the audience, I think it's like you just have to grind. Because like no one cares. Like again, no one cares about you. Like no one, especially no one. If you just launch, really, no one cares. Like you haven't got any like SEO juice. No one knows who you are. And so the best kind of example I like to give is the ConvertKit story with Nathan Barry. He was at the stage for like 2 years. No one cared about his email autoresponder. But what he did do is he just with relentless one-on-one sales, even for someone who's going to pay like $20 a month, he would go and find them, get them on a call, etc. And so I think the first step is just like going to find these people, learning about them. If you learn something that's going to help you build the product better, feed that back into the product process, and then try and take the money. I mean, here's a sales podcast, isn't it? So we can talk about just taking the cash. And so that is the thing. Like, I wouldn't write a blog post. I wouldn't like set up Facebook ads. I would go and hang around in the places that these people hang around. It's like Slack, Reddit, Facebook, forums, if they still exist. And then you can't just go in and spam because you'll get kicked out, but you go in and like talk about the problem that you solve, like write nice posts native in the platform, and then just try and get people on a call to learn about them, and then try and get them to give money, because they're all going to say they love your product, but they're only telling the truth if they will give you cash. So actually, let's give an actionable example here. So we had a SaaS product called Sneeze. This is in 2016 or 17, and Sneeze is for e-com stores, Shopify app. You could search Instagram for keywords for hashtags, and then you could pull any content for that hashtag back onto your product page for social proof, right? Makes sense. And so we were trying to sell it for like $30 a month. And the way we got the first 18 customers, so my partner James was building it. He was a great developer, and my job was to do this, right? We didn't have any money. So what I did is I went into the e-com Facebook groups, and I like post stuff. I got quite good at copywriting, so I got good engagement. And then the pitch was, we're releasing this product. You can get. Oh no, the pitch was here. I'm going to give you like a strategy session on how to use user-generated content, right? Because I knew a bit about this, so I could help you. It's like. So I put like a link in the comments on a post if someone wanted to jump on, and they jump on 30-minute call. And my job was to like extract as much information from them to feed back into James's product roadmap. But then also at the end, I would be like, look, the tool's ready now. You can get 50% lifetime discount because we're screen sharing. Because they get the account first. They're screen sharing for me, so I can look at the account. And I'm like, look, I give you lock in a 50% lifetime discount if we can put in the credit card details on the call right now. And then they do it, and they put in the card details in the app. And then we got 18 customers like that. In the end, the product didn't work. But I think that's a good example of how you do it. Because we got 18, like we started building it, and we had 18 customers after like maybe like 5 to 6 weeks of having the idea.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is the trick. Whether you're a marketer or a salesperson, it's just talking to people, trying to take the money, and then go like you move on to other strategies from that once you have a very good idea who this person is, and you have a good idea that they will actually give you money for the thing you're building.
So when you say to get a good understanding of who this person is and learn more about them, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, for the first... It like the classic like sales, is it spin selling, where it's like situation, problem, implication. So I always start any sales call, as I'm sure you know sales, right? Like just being very broad, understanding them, that person, and what their challenges are.
Yeah.
And so if we take the Sneeze example, I'd be like, okay, so you're selling icing sugar. And okay, so who are you selling icing sugar to? Okay, and who's like the perfect customer? Okay, cool. Roughly how many bags of icing sugar are you selling per week? Okay, amazing. Now, how are you finding these customers? Awesome. Are the customers like enjoying the product? Do they send you pictures of the product? Okay, cool. Do you think that if more customers would see that I'm starting to sell now? But I'm like trying to set the scene. And then, so that's like understanding what their problems and challenges are. But then it's also good to like understand them as a person and what they're trying to achieve. So you could be like, okay, so you're selling icing sugar. Is this like your full-time thing? Cool. And like, ultimately, what's the goal? Is it to like build the next Nestle, or is it to build like a 10K a month e-com store so you can go horse riding with your kids? And so I think on those calls, it is a good idea to understand their problem, what they're trying to achieve, but then also why. And because if you can show them that you understand them as a person, I think that maybe it gives you a greater ability to influence, or I don't know. It informs you of the person who you're trying to help with the business.
And it's if you're a consultant, if you're looking more as like, I'm not a salesperson, I'm not here to sell, I'm here to help them find the right tool for what they need. And you need that information. You need to understand what their motivation is behind it. You need to understand like what just some of your questions, what if I hope the audience took note of it, is you're asking about in depth on how they're currently making sales and getting new clients, and that's actually what you help them with. So without actually asking them questions around your product or your features, what you have, you ask them how they're currently operating without your business. So what you're doing is you're actually building like a pain. Like you're building it up like, okay, yeah, I have to do this. Yeah, it takes this long. Yes, it's complicated. It doesn't work all the time. And then you come in then and say, okay, well, what if you had something that did this? Would that help? And what this is your product.
I couldn't put it better myself. Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, I try to paraphrase. Cool. So that's really good. I love that. So when you're interviewing these people and I call it qualifying. Like this is actually what I think qualifying should be, where most people just look at it as like checking the box. Do you have a pulse? Can you afford it? So once you qualify these prospects and you learn more about them, how do you then take that into your content strategy?
Yeah. Okay. So let's say you've been grinding for 6 months and you have 50 customers paying the monthly subscription. I think now that it is kind of the time to transition into a longer term like acquisition strategy. And again, it might not be content, but I think for the point of this chat, let's say it is content. I think there's two advantages or two ways you should use content to grow. The first is understanding what is the question or the problem this person has before they want to buy your tool and answering that the best out of anyone in your industry. And the second, and that's like well known, that's like content marketing 101, right? It's like help them before and then the next problem you solve with your product. But the next one, and here's like the little known one, I think, is that you can also use the content to collaborate with people in your industry to like strategically build those relationships. And so that could be, you would write a blog post where you get the top 10 people with the biggest audience in your industry to contribute. Or it could be a survey that you run for your market where you send that to like all your ideal customers and then share like really insightful results with them. And so what you're doing there on both of those cases is you're building a piece of content which is valuable, which helps solve the problems before they buy your product. But at the same time, you're developing relationships either with partners or customers that can be leveraged in the future.
And it's also making you guilty by association. You know, you're butting heads with other people that are industry leaders, and makes you automatically, even though you're a newer business, now you're talking and you're working with these other people while you become something then. Yeah.
And so on that point, the reason I'm going to give a little bit of background. We have a podcast marketing agency where we basically do this for customers, right? But through podcast form. We've been like running for a year, but we don't have a website or a name. And so recently I was like, okay, well, we can make this into a real business. We should have a name. And so I was thinking, what should the name be? And the name we've settled on is Fame. And the reason I've chosen Fame is because this is, when you do get the content strategy right, you can get famous in a, like, not famous like DJ Khaled, but like famous in a very, very specific niche. And so exactly what you're saying, there's only one way to get famous. And this is how like Taylor Swift and DJ Khaled do it. It's two things. First, they just create very good content for a specific type of person. Obviously, Taylor Swift's niche is like bigger than a sales tech SaaS company.
Yeah.
But they, if you look at DJ Khaled or Taylor Swift, their content, Taylor Swift is probably the best example. It's so good for a specific type of person. For Taylor Swift, it's like a 27-year-old girl. So that's the first thing. And it takes years to do that. Taylor Swift has been trying to do that since she was like 14 or maybe younger. The second thing is simply being seen around other famous people in that specific niche. And this is why rappers go on each other's tunes. This is why like Taylor Swift will go on like Kanye West song, whatever. And so this is the opportunity I see for B2B businesses to get famous in their niche, is by simply creating consistent, really good content that helps solve the problems of the audience, then also being seen around other people that are famous in the niche. And the more famous, the better, right? Every niche has like the top 3 people. If you start a podcast and you get the top 3 people in your niche on your podcast, have you said, Adam, you're like instantly like a player. You're instantly a name.
It adds so much credibility.
Yeah. And so that, I think, like a lot of people are doing it, but I think that more people can do that, or if more people understood that, then that like shortcuts to the top, shortcuts your journey to the top of like the fame tree in your niche.
Yeah. Well, I started this podcast for two reasons. And the main one is so I could learn. It actually started just so I could learn. But then I noticed that, okay, if I'm learning, I could share this with other people, and then I could use it to also leverage myself up. And so I started to, try to climb that social ladder, by interviewing other people, and that helps me get my name out there more as well. Yeah.
And then the kind of ninja trick is then once you have those relationships in the niche, you like introduce them to each other. And so then you become the connector in the niche. So that's like the next level. We haven't even done that with our clients, but that's
like the Tim Ferriss trick.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. So what else can you do like with your podcast? If you're going to have a podcast, how do you use that to sell? Because you just go out there and what do you talk about?
Yeah. So I think this is like the ninja thing. I think that you find like a uncomfortably narrow niche. So let's say you make like software that helps with Facebook ads. We had a client that did this. And so we were like, okay, we'll create the Facebook ad podcast. But then you like look out and there's like 8 different Facebook ad podcasts, some with like bigger budgets than you. So you're not going to win. The goal there is to go like one subset down. And so we chose to create the Retargeting Wizards podcast, where we just bring on people that are really, really good at retargeting. And so choose a niche that's uncomfortable, ideally because you want to become the number 1 podcast in that niche in 6 months. That's the goal we have, or that's the goal you should have. And then once you have that, there's basically 2 options, and we normally combine them. Is A, you go and find the people that are literally like, that can add value to your audience, have their own audience, and could either be a partner or a customer of yours. That's like the trifecta. So they need to have an audience, ideally. They need to be able to add value to the audience, and they need to be an ideal partner or customer. And if every guest is within that, your podcast is going to grow, your podcast is going to be interesting, and you should be able to get some kind of ROI from guest relationships. Because if they're a great partner, you can work on some kind of partnership. If they're a great customer, you can maybe some time down the road, like give them a free trial or something. So that's, if you are starting a podcast, if guest selection that fits those 3 criteria will basically, so that guest selection and that your niche will define your success.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah.
How do I mean, is there that many guests available that meet those criteria that get as a guest?
Yeah, you like it's like a work in progress, and the more time you spend, the older your podcast is, the more suited to those three criteria you'll get. At the start, maybe you won't be able to get 2 of them. Maybe you'll just get 1 of them. You'll find someone who has an audience, but he's rubbish, and he or she, and he wouldn't be a customer partner. Actually, no, you probably wouldn't do that. The number 1 rule is they have to be able to add value to the audience, because you can't release anything that's not going to add value to the audience. Yeah. And so that's the primary. If they have an audience, or if they could be a good partner or customer, that's kind of a bonus. I had something else to add, but I've forgotten it, so we can go to the next question.
All right. So how do you then, you're creating this and you're getting name and you're getting buzz. Is there a good trick to like a call to action or some way to convert the listeners as well?
Yeah, the big challenge in podcasting is you have the download figures that really are less valuable to you than a website visit. You don't know if any of the content has been listened to. You don't know if it's been downloaded and then shared with 50 friends and listened to like 50 times a day for the rest of their life. Do you know what I mean? So the download metric is not valuable, really. And so the real challenge every podcaster faces is how can they go from download to a permission asset? How can they capture that attention, but then get the permission to then go back and get that attention again and again? And so this is like online marketing 101 is if you're providing something, if you're providing something that adds value, like a blog post, what is the next thing you can do for that customer that helps solve the next problem that you can deliver quickly and cheaply in exchange for an email address? And so just like you have an opt-in on a blog post, we recommend you have an opt-in, and it's not normally specific per episode, but an opt-in for like that helps the guest solve the next problem or adds the next amount of value. And so we have client podcasts where they're talking all about, let's say, this is quite niche, but technical writing. And so each episode is like an interview with a technical writer or documentation manager, super niche. And the opt-in or the way we get the email address is that we have summarized the insights from the first 20 episodes into an ebook that a listener can get if they give us an email address. And so we call the podcast is called Knowledge Base Ninjas, and the opt-in is called the Knowledge Base Ninjas Handbook, I think. And so then you have these episodes that are hosted somewhere that are just over time, ideally converting those downloads into listeners without you doing much. And so yeah, it's about like getting the permission to email someone again so you can then send them more stuff, get them on a demo, or get them into a free trial.
Now it makes sense. This wasn't planned by Tom, but now it makes sense. I actually subscribed and bought your Bcast podcast hosting, and now it makes sense why you've got the email capture system. I guess it's not email capture. You could say it better than I can, but now I'm connecting the dots. Yeah.
It's like, this is the thing, and I don't want to pitch too hard. This is when the whole podcast thing started when I was actually head of marketing at a B2B SaaS company, and we started this podcast. Maybe this might be a good case study, but we were like, here's this very specific type of person we love to sell to. The person is called sales operations. They basically make the sales team more effective. We don't know anything about this person. How can we learn about them? And so I initially just tried to like email these people as head of marketing because I need to learn about them on LinkedIn to see if they would jump on a call with me. They all said no, obviously. And then so we started, the brainwave it's called Sales Ops Demystified. You can Google that and check it out, which is a podcast where we just interview this type of person. And so we were doing that. We started getting some good traction. And then we were like, we have all these downloads, but we don't have any, like, we can't do anything. If we want to like send them a blog post, tell them about this product feature we just released, there's nothing we can do. So we're like, okay, so what is the thing we can do? How can we add more value in exchange for the email address? And that's where we came up with this. And no podcast host allows you to do that very easily, or we couldn't find one. So
yeah,
we built it.
Excellent. So for everybody listening, podcast.fm. If you're going to start a podcast.
FM, but yes.
I'm sorry, Bcast.
Yeah.
Sorry, Bcast.
Thank you, Adam. Come on, let's not pitch too hard.
So I'm curious, the podcast that you were just in reference to, that you would interview sales ops. If you don't know much about them, like what are you doing on what kind of content are you making that's valuable?
Yeah, no, you're so right. Such a good point. So I guess I spent some time learning about the field, but probably only for like 2 weeks before we jumped on started doing the podcast, and I was hosting. It doesn't have to be the marketing person. It could be like someone who actually knows the persona. So the CEO would know, the head of sales would know the persona a bit better. I think what happened is that because of my like lack of knowledge at the start, it basically meant that at the start, the podcast was very much for like beginners in the field. But now we've done 120 interviews. I'm still the host. I think I'm now actually understanding it better. And so the content is actually like better for like intermediate or even slightly advanced people. So I think you're right. Ideally, you would have subject matter expertise in the thing that you're starting a podcast about. But I think that example proves that you don't necessarily have to. I think we got quite lucky with the niche. It's like a very emerging, like new trend. And we started that podcast where there was no other podcast in that area. And then we just executed. So it was nearly a year and a half ago we started that. And it's been like twice a week or once a week continuously for that whole time. So yeah.
Terrific. Well, that's been really helpful. And I think there's a lot of action that people could take from this. Before we start to sign off, what would you say is like your number one tip to any founder that's, just building their company and where to get started?
Yeah, I think like I'm a student of marketing 8 years. I've been trying to work out the marketing thing. And my very recent conclusion is that actually the marketing is much less important than building something that actually solves the problem. And so the elite marketer is the person who understands the person they're selling to so well that they can then complete the feedback loop and help build the product better to push the business forward. The elite marketer is not the person who can like spam people on LinkedIn. Do you know what I mean? It's the person who can understand the person better and therefore enable the company to build a better product. And that is like the key, because the marketer or the salesperson is the person who should really have the best understanding of this person. And that's the core role they should be playing. They shouldn't just be responsible for like getting traffic, leads, demos. They should be responsible for like closing the loop.
Yeah. I love that. This is the first time I've heard that advice, and I couldn't agree with you more. Super important. Tom, thanks so much for joining us. How could people reach out to you or learn more about what you've got going on?
Yeah, thank you so much. That was a really great chat. So Bcast.fm if you do want to start a podcast and you're B2B and you're a marketer. And then we have an agency that is going to have a website, and it will be on fame.fso at some point in the next couple of weeks.
Cool. Tom, thanks so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Startup Sales with Adam Springer. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Contact Adam about speaking engagements or consulting services at adam@startupsales.io.